worn out. Young people, maybe accidents or genetic disorders, এগুলোর জন্য হয়. So till very recently, the only solution was to actually get, commercially available prosthesis parts. Mostly these are stainless steel or titanium, and then graft it and attach it to, not graft it, attach it to bones so that they can have function of their limbs. যেমন একটা খুব কমন প্রবলেম হয় সেটা হচ্ছে যে বল এন্ড সকেট জয়েন্ট ইন দ্য হিপ, যেটাকে হিপ জয়েন্ট বলে, দ্যাট গেটস ওয়ার্ন আউট। তো এটা এখন পর্যন্ত যা ছিল যে ইউজুয়ালি স্টিল, স্টেইনলেস স্টিল বা টাইটেনিয়ামের পার্ট ইউজ করে বল এন্ড সকেট বানিয়ে টোটাল হিপ রিপ্লেসমেন্ট। বাট অ্যাজ ইউজুয়াল দ্য মেইন প্রবলেম ইজ, আমি যখন কমার্শিয়ালি অ্যাভেলেবল পার্টস কিনবো, they are not going to make all sizes. It's not custom, it is commercial. So এখন মানুষের hip joint বা ball joint on the thigh bone, এটা তো আর কাস্টম ডিজাইন, সরি, এটা তো আর কমার্শিয়াল ডিজাইন না, এক একজনেরটা এক এক রকম, ইটস অল কাস্টম। সো কাস্টমাইজড হিপ জয়েন্ট যদি বানানো যেত, এই প্রবলেম কম হয়, and that's where the sort of metal printing is gaining one second class. Okay, let's see, sorry. So এটাতেই হলো actually যেখানে the research is going on, making customizable 3D parts for patients. আবার আরো আছে যেমন স্কাল সার্জারি, তারপরে স্পাইন সার্জারি। দিস ইজ ওয়ান প্লেস। আরেকটা প্লেস যেটাতে ইউজ হচ্ছে যে কাস্টমাইজ পার্ট ফর অ্যারোস্পেস ইন্ডাস্ট্রি, অটোমোটিভ ইন্ডাস্ট্রি, এগুলো জায়গায় ইউজ হচ্ছে। Some of the commercial companies that launch rockets and other things, they are now 3D printing fuel tanks. So you can see a lot of these videos online also. Give you some idea of this, plus welding টা actually এখন importance আছে এটা বোঝার জন্য। এই তো আমরা বেসিক্যালি ফার্স্টে ট্রেডিশনাল ওয়েল্ডিং টাই পড়বো, পরে if we have time we will go into some of these advanced ones. তো দেখি কয়জন আসছে, 50 or what, around 50 people. Okay, so let us start. Okay, so আমরা যেটা বলেছিলাম, welding is that branch of manufacturing where you are adding material. You are adding material and it is considered an addition process, or you can say it is it's a joining process, and the joints formed are permanent joints because এটাকে আমাকে যদি disassemble করতে হয়, I have to cut the welding. So এখানে দেখি ম্যানুফ্যাকচারিং এর মধ্যে assembly process, assembly ভিতরে permanent joining process, সেটার মধ্যে welding. And we know welding, soldering, brazing, similar. They have a lot of different uses, and there are a couple of different types of welding. Common ones that you see is the arc welding, where you have an electrode and you essentially arc, pass high discharge voltage to melt the filler rod and seal the joint. Different kinds are there. We'll discuss a little bit of the welding history. This is not really very important, just for you to have an idea. These are the common ones. You have the arc welding with the electrode, which is also the filler material, which is the electrode, not the filler material, sorry, the electrode. The electrode is usually from tungsten and it provides the sparking necessary to weld the part. You might use a filler wire with the arc weld, or you might actually melt the part itself and join the two portions of the part. Usually you use an inert gas like argon to cover the weld area because the temperature is so high, your metal actually oxidizes and you don't want that, especially for steel and others. The other one is the resistance welding. Essentially, you have two electrodes and you pass very high current. The high current melts and attaches the two weld parts. So you essentially weld like that. Along with this, depending upon how you are doing it, you could do spot welding or you could do seam welding. Spot welding is where you do spots of welding, small spots of welding along the length of the weldment. Weldment holo the দুটো পার্টকে আমি জয়েন করে একটা ওয়েল্ডিং করছি, সেটাকে বলে weldment. So as you are going along, you can do spot welding or you can do seam welding. The other one is the oxyacetylene welding, which is the common one you see in shops. Essentially, you burn acetylene gas in oxygen, the high temperature, along with the filler material helps to deposit it by melting and joining the parts. এখানে যে জিনিসটা যে আমরা ইউজুয়ালি এটাকে একটা পাউডারের আন্ডারে রাখার চেষ্টা করি as a protection envelope, so that again same as the arc welding, যেখানে গরম হচ্ছে it can be so hot the metal might actually corrode or oxidize. What are some of the advantages of welding? এখান থেকে আমরা বলছিলাম, well, one is it provides a very permanent joint, and if you do the welding correctly, if there are times when the welding area, the welded area may actually become stronger than the base material. So it can be stronger than the parent or the base material if proper welding techniques are followed. Welding is also very economic way to join, and এই জন্য আমরা different ইয়েতে দেখি, shops এ দেখি alternative mechanical methods actually require elaborate process. Like আমি যদি rivet করতে চাই two plates, I'll have to make holes through them. If I want to screw them together or nut, use a bolt, nut and bolt, then I have to do internal threading or at least drill holes through them. Then আমি যদি আবার seal করতে চাই, because if I put the nut through the hole, there is some clearance along the hole. So এটা যদি আমি আবার seal করতে চাই, I have to use washer and other things, which becomes a problem. Plus, obviously, extra rivets, nuts and bolts and screws, this add extra weight to the joint part. And আরেকটা যে সুবিধা হচ্ছে যে অনেক ক্ষেত্রে অন্যান্য জিনিস করতে হলে আমাদেরকে ফ্যাক্টরি সেটিং এ রাখতে, যেমন if I want to weld two pieces of steel together, drill করতে হলে অনেক সময় আমাকে এগুলা মেটাল শপে আনতে হয়। I have to drill, I have to do internal tapping, then I have to put the screw. But welding can be done on the spot, even in the field. So either arc welding বা gas welding টা আরো বেশি common, কারণ gas cylinder থাকলেই হয়. So you can do this, and so those are some of the technological and commercial benefits. What are some of the problems? Well, drilling kora, threading kora, nowadays you can do on CNC machines. You can argue that yes, now robots can also do welding, but it's still more of an art. So skill manush proyojon. That's a problem. It's a drawback. It is dangerous. We're talking about flame and cylinders and gas, and also arc welding at ultraviolet light emit, which is bad. As mentioned, welding causes permanent bonds. So if you don't want the joint anymore, you have to cut it. And certain quality problems are in welds, which can actually reduce the strength. যেমন অনেক সময় ওয়েল্ড করার সময় দেখা গেল ওয়েল্ড ডিড নট গো অল দ্য ওয়ে ইনটু বিটুইন দ্য টু ম্যাটেরিয়ালস, তাহলে গ্যাপ রয়ে গেছে, ওখানে বাতাস ঢুকবে, পানি ঢুকবে, and over time corrosion হয়ে the weld might actually break. And এগুলো আমরা দেখি অনেক সময় যে প্লেগ্রাউন্ডে যেসব জিনিস বানানো থাকে লোহা দিয়ে, দেখা যায় যে এক জায়গায় ওয়েল্ডিং সহ জং করে মরিচা ধরে খুলে চলে আসছে। So that's a common problem with welding, and it's very difficult actually to inspect a weld. So ওটা খুব এক্সপার্ট মানুষ লাগে to actually inspect, because উপর দিয়ে হয়তো দেখা যাচ্ছে completely filled, but ভিতরে maybe porosity বা গ্যাপ থাকতে পারে where water and oxygen can go and cause corrosion. Overall আমরা যদি বলি around 50 types and more welding আছে, so definitely সব ধরনের জানা সম্ভব না, but in effect we can categorize welding into the two main types: fusion welding and solid state welding. Fusion welding is where we melt substances and join, and solid state is the other kind. We shall see what's the difference between the two. But solid state implies that এখানে liquefaction হচ্ছে না. So fusion welding আসি. This is the process where you use heat to melt the base metals themselves. So দুইটা base metal বা একই base metal, you give enough heat that they melt and join. You can also, to facilitate the process, use a filler metal or filler material to further join the weld. যেগুলা fusion welding এ filler metal use করা হয় না, they are known as autogenous welds. That means self-generating weld. হ্যাঁ, তো দুইটা মেটাল পিস বা একই মেটালের দুইটা পিস নিলাম, নিয়ে আমি যদি ওয়েল্ড করি আর জোড়া লেগে যায় without using any filler material, they are autogenous. And fusion category, most of the widely known ones are included. You can think of, right? Arc welding, oxyacetylene gas welding, these are fusion welding. আমরা যদি আর্কেরটায় আসি, arc welding একটা গ্রুপ আছে, it's not only one type. যেমন আমরা দুইটা খুব কমন জানি, TIG আর MIG, right? These are the two common welds. MIG welding use করা হয় both basically to join and weld aluminum alloys. The process is something like this. You have the two parts, bring them together. You have the electrode, which is arcing. You have the filler metal, which melts and joins the two parts. And you give a gas. This gas comes out of the nozzle of the arc weld, and it is not used for combustion. Rather, it provides an envelope around the welding area so that oxygen does not come into the heated zone and oxidize the metal. And then the welding looks something like this. Okay. The other kind of fusion welding that I'm already দেখলাম, resistance welding. You have two electrodes, you have two metals plates that you want to melt and join. You pass electricity and you'll develop a weld nugget or a weld spot where the two metals are welded. So if you are moving slow, you could do seam welding. But if you move fast, you will actually have spot welding. There will be gaps, because it takes some time for the metal to melt under this electricity flow. The other type is the most common type. Oxyacetylene welding, and oxyacetylene welding টা সবচেয়ে common হওয়ার সাথে সাথে it is also a type of fusion welding, because এখানে আমরা কি করি, basically we burn gas produce so much high temperature that it melts and fuses the base metals or the parent metals together. We might use a filler metal, usually it is preferred. And the process is something like this. So you have the filler rod, you have the nozzle through which you're delivering the mixture of acetylene and oxygen. It's igniting here. The heat produces the weld, and you can do very nice spot or seam welding. You have to use two different cylinders, acetylene and oxygen. So that is dangerous because acetylene is highly combustible, and oxygen, you know, pure oxygen is like an explosive. So it had a problem. But the good thing is you don't require high electricity like in resistance welding or arc welding, and if you bring this two along, it's portable. You could do welding wherever you want. So on spot, that's the benefit. Other types of fusion welding, you have the electron beam welding, where instead of using two electrodes, you pass actually an electron beam through the metal, and the metals actually melt. So electron beam is something like your CRT monitor. You have an electrode gun that emits high energy electrons, and when the electrons travel through an impinge on the surface of the metal, they deliver kinetic energy, very high kinetic energy, which is converted to heat, melts the metal, joins them by fusion. You could also use laser welding. This is also very common. Laser can actually be used either to weld metal or to cut metal. And essentially the process is the laser delivers a lot of high energy in a very small area or volume of the metals being joined. And that high energy raises the local temperature past melting for the metal pieces. And that's how you can weld. Benefits of laser, well, you have no mess of electrodes, fillers, gases, cylinders, nothing like that, but it is energy demanding, sophisticated, and also laser can be potentially dangerous if not handled properly, especially for eyes. But they are used all over the place. Even garito onek welding they use laser spot welds. And if you inspect, maybe say the underneath of the trunk or the boot of a car, luggage rack, you will see the spot welds. Most of the time, these are laser welded. And the main reason behind that is because lasers can be automated very easily. You can use a robot and a computer to control where the laser goes, what energy is delivered when it starts and stops. It's very easy to control laser beam. So that's why it's used. The second type of welding is known as the solid state, and it refers to joining process in which coalesce results when from application of pressure alone or a combination of heat and pressure. So এমনি ওয়েল্ডে আমরা দেখলাম যে হিট দেই, এটাতে মেটাল বলে বা ফিলার করে জোড়া লেগে যায়। যেমন I am giving heat through electrode, through burning of gas, through resistance, through electrons, through lasers, these kind of things. But the other kind of welding is actually where you give a lot of pressure between two metal plates or two weldments, and you may or may not provide heat to speed up the process. But the heat is nowhere near the sort of heat you do in arc welding or gas welding. The temperature is just to increase and enhance. And there is no metal filler used, neither do the metal plates themselves melt while joined. So if I come to this, যে প্রেসারের কারণে দুইটা মেটাল পিস কেন জোড়া লাগবে? They might be same metal, দুইটা same mild steel plate, or they might be different metal, different material and different elements. কেন join হবে from pressure? Well, this is because all metal atoms vibrate even under room conditions. আমি যদি দুইটা মেটালের প্লেট রাখি, there is some finite chance that these electrons might go over to the other side, the other metal, and then start to form bonds between the surface metals of one plate compared to the surface metals in the other. So when you increase pressure, this diffusion process is faster because the atoms are close by. Also, if you provide heat, that will speed it up because atoms and electrons move faster when heated. So এটারই একটা type হচ্ছে diffusion welding, where two surfaces are held at a high temperature and elevated temperature, high pressure and elevated temperature, and the parts then join by solid state diffusion. The other kind is friction welding. This is also a solid state welding because you are not using anything to melt any substance in joint. You are not providing energy for that. So এখানে যে coalescence হয় বা join হয়, that is due to the heat generated between friction of two surfaces. তো দুইটা সারফেস যদি প্রচন্ড ঘর্ষণ হয় এবং ওখানে যদি টেম্পারেচার অনেক বেড়ে যায়, you will also have friction welding. So you can do friction welding of holes and all using some setup like this, a lathe machine. Okay. Third solid state welding is ultrasonic. Well, if you remember, the metals, if you press them and keep them, they might weld, a cold weld. How does that happen? Well, atoms might jump from one metal to the other, and this may cause joint, and that is how pressure leads to welding. So if I can increase this jump of atoms between metals on the surface, I increase and make the process better. So one way is to heat it to increase the kinetic energy of the atoms so that they can bond, or you could provide energy in the form of ultrasonic vibration. Ultrasonic vibrations jar and move the atoms and help to join the two parts faster. অনেক সময় আল্ট্রাসাউন্ডের সাথে ইভেন কি বলে ইভেন forgot the name. Oh, ultrasonic সাথে you might also use heat. The best thing about ultrasonic welding is it is the one that can be used to weld plastics. Certain plastics you give ultrasonic vibration, the metals will the plastic will actually fuse. You know the plastic is not possible to weld using oxyacetylene flame because it will melt. So এই যে solid state এগুলার কাজ, well, they are mostly as a response to automated industry. যেখানে industrial welding arms are moving and welding that way. All right, the welding head, it moves the welding head relative to the work, and this is how you can use robotic welds to make cars and other things. So এখানে আবার non-fusion welding processes are good because who wants to bother about fuel and all? Especially if you are talking about oxyacetylene, you are talking about TIG, you burn out the TIG, the tungsten over time, you burn out the fuel, the gas, acetylene over time. So এখন আমি যদি automated করি, I have an industry automation, আমাকে মানুষ রাখতে হবে some way, I have to keep on replenishing this. But if I have a solid state one, I am using maybe friction welding, maybe ultrasonic welding, diffusion welding like this. You don't really necessarily eat up the material, so you could continue for longer, and the process can be automated. So let me stop here before I go to the next part. Any question up to this?
Yes, sir.
জি, একটু জোরে বললে ভালো হয়।
No, sir.
হ্যাঁ, আমি এখন শুনতে পাচ্ছি, বল। Yes. Yes. Okay, anyways. Any other question from anyone else? Any question from anyone else?
No, sir.
Okay. So তাহলে আমাদের মোটামুটি ওয়েল্ডিংটা আমরা বুঝলাম। এখন আমরা ওয়েল্ডিং এর কিছু স্পেশাল রিকোয়ারমেন্ট বা এগুলোকে বলে এক্সপিরিয়েন্স শেয়ারিং, যেগুলো ওয়েল্ডিং এর জন্য ভালো, এগুলো শিখবো। কারণ অবভিয়াসলি আমরা যেটা বললাম যে ওয়েল্ডিং ইজ অলসো অ্যান আর্ট along with the science, and it takes skill to master it. So welding is জানা ভালো, and a lot of you will be using welding in your lab work or maybe project or basis for making parts. If you're using metal, that's probably what you'll do. So a welding, it provides solid connection and the junctions or the edges of the parts are also produced in the process. So based on the characteristics of the weld joint, it's related to the type of joint and the type of weld used to weld the joints together. The type of joints are type of welding, দুইটা দিয়ে আমরা welding এর type এবং welding এর product কে classify করতে পারি. Think of, let's see, the types of joints. You have few joints: butt joint, corner joint, lap joint, T-joint, edge joint. And these are better if you see the picture. So this one is a butt joint because the two products or material, they join face to face. They're joined face to face. So this is a type of what is known as a butt joint. The second one is a corner joint. You form a corner, you connect one of the metal to the other metal's edge. Then C is lap joint. This is very common. আমরা যেটাকে ওয়েল্ড করতে চাইলে আমি একটা ম্যাটেরিয়ালকে টেনে আরেকটা উপরে আনি and then I weld. This helps to make the weld stronger. So butt joint যেরকম bend করলে ভেঙে যাওয়ার সম্ভাবনা, এখানে যেহেতু overlapping, it's not so much. Then you can have the T joint, যেখানে একটা flat প্লেটের উপরে একটা upright plate weld করে দিলে, that's a T joint. And then you have an edge joint. You see edge joint similar to the lap joint. এই হলো আমাদের পাঁচটা মেইন টাইপের. Okay, these are the 5 main types of welded joints. So also types we can have in different types of fillet that are used in welding. So you can see key type of fillet used kora hoy. You mostly produce a triangular cross-sectional welding, you see. Okay, then there are some more. You can read this. All right, so the next one is your এটা তো গেল হলো different type-এর fillet weld গুলো. এখানে একটা question আছে. I was waiting if somebody saw this and asked me. But imagine if you are trying to weld here, and let me annotate this. Different color, be better. Say red. Imagine you are using a nozzle. Say just simply you are using arc welding. So you have the nozzle here and you have the filler rod. Now, আমি এরকম যখন weld করছি একটা joint, I'm actually making an edge weld, right? What you have discussed, corner weld. Now, এটাতে weld করতে গেলে কি সমস্যা হতে পারে? Because this you see a lot, right? Two metals you add and jointer মধ্যে দিয়ে you weld all the কি সমস্যা হতে পারে? Anyone?
স্যার ফিলার রডটা বারবার মানে আটকে যায় স্যার ওয়েল্ড করার সময় স্যার।
হ্যাঁ, এটা একটা প্লাস ওই গ্যাপের মধ্যে পুরা ওয়েল্ড না যেতে পারে, রাইট?
জি স্যার।
গ্যাপ পর্যন্ত, because you see you have to have the weld go all the way up to here. It may not go. So এটা যদি একটা রড হয় এরকম, you want to make a L-shaped rod by your welding method. তাহলে এই যে এটা তো জোড়াটা, এই জোড়া বড় জন্য আমি নিচ্ছি, it may not touch all the way. ওখানে তাহলে দুর্বলতা থাকবে, তাহলে weakness, structural weakness, and it might actually have corrosion and break. So that's a problem. What about the next one, second one? This one. What about this one? Anyone? Second problem কি? Second কি ঝামেলা? This one is also good P type, but এখানে যে সমস্যাটা হচ্ছে যে again এই ঠিক না, just like here. So যারা inexperienced welder তারা এটা খেয়ালই করবে না, তারা ওয়েল্ড করে যাবে, they will think that the part is together, but the part won't stay for long because corrosion and all fall off. We're still in types of welds. Let's see how many different types of weld I can. আচ্ছা, এখন যে জিনিসটা সেটা হচ্ছে আমি যদি দুইটা পিস নেই, সে আমি বাট জয়েন্ট করব, মানে আমি সামনাসামনি দুইটা মেটাল let's see, সে দুইটা পিস আছে metal piece and they are forming a butt joint, so I want to weld them using butt weld. So আমার কথা হচ্ছে এখানে কি আমি ডাইরেক্টলি ওয়েল্ড করে দিব এভাবে, নাকি এখান থেকে এখানে প্রথমে কেটে এখান থেকে এখানে কেটে এই পার্টটুকু আমি সরাই ফেলি?
সরাই ফেলাটা বেটার।
why is that?
সারফেস এরিয়া বেড়ে যাবে স্যার।
হ্যাঁ, এরিয়া, কন্ট্যাক্ট এরিয়া বেড়ে যাবে, ঠিক না? দিস ইজ অবভিয়াস ফ্রম দ্য ডিজাইন। আমি যদি এরকম করে রাখি, আমি যদি এরকম করে রাখি, and now green color কে যদি আমি ওয়েল্ড বুঝাই, বুঝছি এটা পুলের মতো হবে, so contact area of the weld is much higher. So that is what they're doing, drawing grooves for easier welding. Different type of way of saving the weld. Also এগুলার মতো করে করার সাথে সাথে you can have different type of cut. You can have V-shaped cut, or like here it's V-shaped, or you could have a circular U-shaped. We call it U. It's more circular. So আমি কাটটা সেমি সার্কেলের মতো কাটবো। জি, এক সেকেন্ড, হ্যাঁ, 1 সেকেন্ড। হ্যালো, সো সরি, সো এখানের সাথে এখানের সি এর সাথে ডি এর তফাৎ থাকে। C it's a V cut, D is a U cut, more or less same. And you could also have double V cut like here. Eta is actually preferable in some circumstances because দুই দিক দিয়ে weld করলে you have joint on both sides instead of one. But the one problem is you're also reducing the metal thickness. এখানে কিন্তু metal thickness only this much. Metal thickness is much less. এখানে কিন্তু metal thickness বেশি। But as opposed to that, আমি যদি দুদিকে ডাবল ভি দেই, এরিয়াও বাড়ছে এখানে এবং এখানে এরিয়া বাড়ছে। So that is a benefit of that. So these are some of the pros and cons of these different welding types. All right. There are a few more. Egula is a little less, but egula you can see. One হচ্ছে যেটাকে বলে ল্যাপ জয়েন্টে করা হয়। ল্যাপ জয়েন্টের ক্ষেত্রে ল্যাপ জয়েন্ট মানে যেকোনো ওভারল্যাপের ক্ষেত্রে you might actually draw big or punch plug holes and then fill up that hole with weld. In that case এটা অনেকটা
জিনিসটা রিভেটের মতো হয়ে গেল না স্যার?
হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ, আমি ওটাই বললাম যে এটা অনেকটা তখন রিভেটের মতো কাজ করে। এক্স্যাক্টলি। আর আমাকে এখানে রাখা একটা জিনিস যে আমাকে যে ড্রিলিং এর পার্টটা করতে হবে, that might be difficult. So you don't usually see this that often. Usually মানুষে যেটা করবে যে এগুলার ক্ষেত্রে you have a weld and they essentially they will weld along this seam here on the other side like that. Seam weld করে দিবে। Similar to the plug hole is also your slot hole. Similar, এটা একটু বড়, more or less like a oval shape এর মতো, and then you weld. That's the other one, particularly using a slot hole. Right. Okay. So আর যে কয়টা বলেছিলাম আমি spot weld, seam weld আমি বলে আসছি. That is what is shown in the picture here. Let me explain this a little bit. স্পট ওয়েল্ড হলো আমি একটা লাইনে যাব, কিছু কিছু দূর পর আমি ওয়েল্ড করব। হ্যাঁ, স্পট ওয়েল্ড এটা সেভস টাইম, ইট অলসো সেভস দ্য ফিলার ম্যাটেরিয়াল না আমার। বাট সমস্যা হচ্ছে ডেফিনেটলি দ্য জয়েন্ট ইজ নট এভরিওয়্যার, সো ইট ইজ আ লিটল বিট উইক। অন দি আদার হ্যান্ড সিম ওয়েল্ড হলো কন্টিনিউয়াস ওয়েল্ড লাইক আ সিম, so this one is very easier to do. No, sorry, not easier to do. This one is stronger, and অনেক ক্ষেত্রে আমরা এখানে U টাইপের হোল করে or slot করে নিবি for you. So this is your seam. Anyways, class, আমরা তাহলে এখন একটু break নেই. We are almost done with the first part. Let us take a 15 minutes break, and we come back again. Now is 1:35. Let us come back at 1:50 and we'll start. All right. I have a small thing to take care of in the meantime. So again, 1:50 I will sign in. In the meantime, jara jara ye kore nai, you can give your attendance on the chat. Okay. Thank you. I will meet after 15.